Hi, ladies and gentlemen. It's your favorite time of week, time for the BC Poly Hot Stove. I'm Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. I'm here in Burnaby, and I'm joined by...
You're joined live from the beautiful legislature in Victoria. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca. Jordan, good morning.
Good morning. How is life in Victoria, Mr. K?
It has been a very loud and somewhat raucous week here in Victoria, and so today, Friday, it feels like working on a Saturday almost. It's just so comparatively quiet and nice here.
Peaceful. Well, you get rid of most of the politicians on Friday, so it's like the place gets fumigated every week.
It's true. They do, when the House is sitting, they do call Thursday Ledge Friday. That is an old thing that I did not invent. I cannot take credit for, but it does kind of express how everyone feels.
I believe it. I believe it. All right, well, let's jump right into it because on the front burner, I know you want to talk about kind of the growing conflict between two groups we thought were pretty cozy political bedfellows.
Well, I mean, it's how cozy they were. I mean, they signed an agreement, Greens did, to put the NDP in power. I mean, that's not commentary on my part. That's what happened. And I think in the wake of the PR debacle, the Greens realized that they are 2 years deep into this with very little to show for it to their voters. And then more recently, when the NDP, and I think you and I would agree to their credit, started aggressively pursuing LNG and introduced a bill, Carol James, with more incentives for LNG to develop, and the details of which we don't need to get into here. But the Greens strongly objected and pointed out this was actually an even better deal from the LNG proponents' perspective than one offered by the BC Liberals. Well, the Greens were apoplectic, and I don't even think I could summarize the lengths they went up to in the House. Andrew Weaver had a fantastic time reading old NDP quotes about LNG, which are, shall we say, somewhat divergent from their current policy. And then this week, and I want to talk about this later again, is the BC Liberals had been questioning the NDP about a rather shabby plan to explicitly pay non-unionized social services staff, I think 40% less than unionized staff, which is astonishing. And the NDP, their line, especially from the Minister Shane Simpson, was not only are we not going to defend this, you're not even allowed to ask this question. This is our file, and you are the party that ruined all this, et cetera, and so forth. And the Greens, to their credit, stood up and said, you know what? The opposition asked some pretty good questions on this, and Adam Olson, who was the guy who asked it, said, I beg you, please give me an answer to defend this policy that doesn't reference the previous 16 years. Shane Simpson stood up and led with the previous 16 years.
Oh, boy.
You can see the wedge dividing between Dr. Weaver, his caucus, and the NDP. I don't know how much of it is sincere and how much of it is positioning, because the election is now, there's less. It's closer in the. I can't talk this morning. The last election is further in the rearview mirror than the next one's ahead, and so they're starting to look ahead to 2021. But that is a story that I think is going to be the defining story in BC politics for the next 2 years.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. I mean, let's talk about what they got out of this. The Greens have gotten out of the NDP partnership. Site C is being built, which they are not happy about. LNG is coming to British Columbia. They do not like that. The Climate Action Plan, frankly, the more you dig into it, the more you realize it's pretty flimsy. There's a lot that has to go right for the NDP to get even close to a target. Prop rep
proportional representation, yeah.
Prop rep failed. We're all using Uber and Lyft right now, so obviously, so that hasn't gone through. This Tech Innovation Commissioner that they're also high on, have we seen a single report? Have we seen any progress? I'm sure there's something going on there, but we're no more techie than we were 2 years ago. The Greens really have, you're right, accomplished nothing except they've tied up Trans Mountain in court. Chances are the NDP might have done that anyways.
That's exactly right. And so if you are Adam Olson, Sonia Furstenau, or Andrew Weaver going to your voters in 2 years' time and trying to tell them stuff that you've point to stuff that you've accomplished, it's a tough case to make, because if you like what the government is doing, vote for the government.
But the speculation tax is marginally better thanks to that.
And Weaver, in private conversation, will point to a number of things that have not happened and never seen the light of day because he squashed them behind the scenes. And you know what? I actually believe him. But the thing is, you can't point to a negative and say, if it wasn't for us, this thing that you've never heard about, we're the reason you've never heard about it.
Yeah, and I think as the Corrigan NDP have become emboldened by the fact that there's never been a political consequence for any of their decisions, they'll throw Green by the wayside anyways. And yeah, sure, challenge us on secret ballot or whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious, what is the much valued Secretariat doing right now? They're supposed to be holding these guys together. We're spending million plus dollars a year on essentially a relationship building exercise for the NDP and the Greens, and yet they're at each other's throats in the House.
Well, and really, it's the cast can be boiled down to two things. It's the Greens will support the NDP on confidence votes, and they've done so unflinchingly, and that there are supposed to be no surprises between the two. And the Greens will be the first to tell you the first part's worked fine. The second part, not always. And so the speculation tax, I think when that sort of came out to the fore, they were genuinely surprised. So, there seems to be a growing awareness that it hasn't worked out as well as certainly they hoped it would.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know you had on the back burner LNG, but why don't we just walk right into that? Because walk me through the drama of the other day where the NDP managed to actually lose a vote in the House because the Greens called division and then bolted. It's
I ran into too much trouble in the last segment because my words got away from me, and I fear that's exactly what's going to happen here because it was actually a very complicated situation. Essentially, the LNG tax bill was being debated in committee stage in the House, and the Greens had introduced a number of amendments, including delaying everything for 6 months, that hadn't gone anywhere. And you know what? Fair enough. This is their right in the House, and they're allowed to debate, and they were following the rules. However, part of the Mike DeYoung, on the BC Liberal critic, was asking about things like the issue at play here was that the NDP had removed a provision that agreements with proponents had to be made public. Essentially, they were removing some transparency. The Greens decided to call division and then literally ran out. Now, the Greens are saying they abstained, which is one interpretation, but I think to abstain, you have to stay in the House and just simply refuse to vote yes or no. They left. Now, that doesn't matter. The point is the NDP no longer had the numbers to win this vote. The committee chair is BC Liberal MLA Joan Isaacs. She voted with the opposition on this, saying that's the way her conscience directed her to. There was some quibbling that, according to precedent, she is, again, I'm going to use the air quotes, supposed to vote with government. Yeah. But I think even the NDP are smart enough to know this is not the time to be telling a female politician that she should not vote according to her conscience.
Is that like when by convention the Lieutenant Governor is supposed to listen to the First Minister and take her advice no matter what it is?
Yes, I think exactly.
Oh, so how'd that work out? How'd that work out for Christie?
Well, we all got fired. That's how that worked out.
Okay,
and
so maybe convention is just supposed to. Okay, I gotcha. And like when you get elected to a political party, you're by convention supposed to serve with that political party throughout. Is that also convention? Oh, okay. I just want to know what the conventions are over there.
Well,
I know about bare arms now. I want to know all the conventions that are going on.
My arms are bare today too. The convention is that the chair is supposed to either vote with the government or preserve the status quo. Now, ironically, that's exactly what she did because the NDP was trying to change an aspect of the LNG law, which is basically they don't have to share the agreements. So, I mean, you can have it both ways. The end of the matter is that they lost. And it was actually defeated in a final vote. And so unless they do something else to introduce some more legislation, LNG agreements will still be public.
Crazy. It's one of those little things that it's really inside the Beltway because it's a legislative procedural issue. But man, very embarrassing for the government. There seem to be some reports on Twitter, although I haven't gone back to look at the answer of the video, that Hulk Corrigan may have made a reappearance, getting quite upset with Ms. Isaacs. Is that
Well, I mean, it's not enhancered because he didn't actually, say it on the record. But the best I can gather is he simply told her, because he's sitting quite next to her in the chamber, that she made a mistake. And I think those were his exact words: "You made a mistake." And obviously, he felt that way. To be fair to the premier, it doesn't appear that he was yelling at her or anything like that. He just expressed his extreme displeasure at the way she had voted. He certainly would have subscribed to the idea that she is supposed to vote with government, but she disagreed, and that's all that matters right now.
Yeah, no, it's entertaining to say the least. I just think the visual of the Greens asking for division and then just scrambling to get out of the House. My understanding is that you actually can't abstain if they're in the room. They have to vote yay or nay, or
there you go.
Yay. So, but yikes, that's a bad visual for those guys. They should be smarter than that.
They obviously were. I don't mean to say playing a game in a dismissive sense, but they were playing a game, and you could argue it worked out for them in that they managed to embarrass the government on this file. They are white hot angry over LNG. I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, well, it'll be interesting to see. I noticed the Times Colonist had an op-ed out today. Now, the Times Communist, which is probably, the Greens, well, look, it's probably the one newspaper that all of them read because they all live in Victoria. Not all Greens everywhere. The 3 Green MLAs live in Victoria. So this is probably as close to a Green Party organ as you're going to have. They're very critical of the Greens and saying now's the time, basically put up or shut up, do something, or face electoral oblivion next time.
Oh, you're exactly right. I mean, the editorial said essentially what we said off the top, which is that they haven't been able to point to much. And if you are really this angry as you say you are, and I believe they are, about LNG, then, you need to do something about it. Standing and making speeches and using the phrase generational sellout over and over and over again, when you have the power to essentially force the government's hand, it doesn't amount to much.
Yeah, this generational sellout line, that doesn't work. Dr. Weaver, try to wordsmith something a little bit better than that, because you're talking about great jobs for many generations and other revenue and whatnot. So I find that their weakest kind of line. All right, well, I'm going to talk about a different kind of gas. Gasoline. From natural gas and from Weaver's hot air, we go to gasoline prices, which here in the Lower Mainland have reached $1.63.9. Even out in Langley, where I live, we're in the 160s. Although if you go a little further across the border, where you escape the greedy clutches of TransLink, you can actually still get gas for about $1.40. What a deal.
Oh, is that all?
Pardon me. So I just want to break down for you the gas taxes on a liter of gasoline here in British Columbia. Now, you know me. I was former BC director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Every year, the Taxpayers Federation would do Gas Tax Honesty Day. It's on the Thursday before the May long weekend, which is usually when we see the price spike every spring. So think about that, Maclean. It's only April 5th, and we have more price spikes coming. That's a big problem. But here's the taxes on a Lower Mainland liter of gas. 10 cents a liter to the feds in excise tax. 9 cents a liter now in carbon tax. 18.5 cents a liter in TransLink tax. 8.5 cents to the BC government for excise tax. And on top of all that, GST at 5%, which is right now another 8 cents a liter. That's 54 cents a liter in gas taxes. And people will say, oh, wow, we're getting gouged. John Horgan yesterday at a press conference, it's the oil companies gouging us. Well, no, the oil companies are, obviously supply is sort of finite. It's dwindling because there's more demand for gas as people start to travel in the spring and do different things. Refineries go on and offline. And if it really was a supply issue, then John Horgan should be leading the fight to build some type of pipe that kind of went from Alberta
Crazy
to
talk.
the mainland. I'm not sure what we would call that pipeline, but it would transcend mountains, perhaps. Anyways, all of this kind of hypocrisy boiling around. The bottom line here is, I've done this math before people. The only difference between the price of gas in British Columbia, in Surrey, BC, and across the border in Blaine, Washington, where it is far cheaper, is taxes. The actual untaxed per liter accounting for Canadian dollar is about the same. Canada may have a couple cents more per liter at a given time. The rest is taxes. And this is why it's so unfathomable to me that, John Horgan, Mr. Affordability, Mr. We're going to make life so affordable for everyone in the Lower Mainland, he just so meekly went along with allowing TransLink to raise their gas tax by 1.50 a liter, by piling that on with another cent a liter carbon tax, by not fighting the feds and saying, look, you guys have got to stop charging GST on the taxes that are already being charged on gas, which is a tax on tax problem. There's lots of avenues for him to go down, and instead he just kind of shakes his, angry old man, shaking his fist at a cloud, saying, oh, it's all oil prices gouging. By the way, there was a provincial government report done for the BC NDP government the last time prices spiked that said, no, it's not gouging, it's supply and taxes.
Well, it's so much easier and just feels better to blame oil companies, though, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, look, no one is shedding a tear for oil companies. I'm not like, oh, let's hold a vigil for them. And certainly there's blame to go around for everyone. But you have the highest gas taxes in North America, and that directly translates to the highest gas prices in North America. But here's where the real hypocrisy comes in. We talked about the supply issue, we talked about tax, whatever, affordability. He's a hypocrite on all that. What bothers me about this is that the whole point of the carbon tax, the whole point of John Horgan's climate plan is to make us use less gasoline. And the way they've chosen to do that is by increasing the costs of a liter of gas. So he pretends now that he might look at some sort of tax thing in the press conference when he's getting beat up by reporters who are tired of spending $1.60 a liter. He pretends he's interested in that, but this is actually philosophically what he has committed the government to. This is philosophically what he and his lefties and the Greens and his environmental movements and George Heyman want. They want gas to be as expensive as possible so that people buy less of it. You can take transit instead, or ride a bike, or walk, or just don't work from home, or just cease to exist. Whatever lowers the greenhouse gas emissions in your particular life. Am I wrong? Like, isn't that the most obvious piece of hypocrisy?
Well, I mean, it's the same reason we tax cigarettes, right? It's to disincentivize using it. So it's the same thing. You're exactly right. And so if they were to relieve some of the pressure by, removing some of these taxes, they would then be in the position of their climate plan would be taxing gas and then also subsidizing it. Wrap your head around that.
I don't get it. Like, at least come out and say, you know what, it sucks, it's too expensive, we'll make life affordable in other ways, but gosh darn it, we got to get off gasoline. Like, if that's what you really believe. But of course,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if it actually happens. I asked Horgan just before Christmas about a slightly similar issue, which was property taxes going up because of the employer's health tax, and that he had criticized the previous governments for downloading costs and pursuing balanced budgets and not. I'm using Horgan's words. Basically, you're doing the same thing, Premier. And he said at the time, you know what, you're right. And we should look at ways to not download costs to municipalities because they're just passing on the taxes to citizens, and that's not right. What happened? Absolutely nothing. So it's Horgan may well have just been sort of responding to pressure yesterday and hoping to sort of buy time to get through the summer of high gas taxes by saying, yeah, we're looking at it. And so he looked at ways to relieve the employer's health tax on municipal governments. What happened? Nothing.
Yeah, no, it's not great. Hey, Maclean, I'm going to get you to go into who's heating up and do yours. I'm going to switch earpieces while we do it because my earpiece has gone funny. So talk about who's heating up for you in politics.
Well, I mean, as I say to the empty room, to me, there's only really one choice here, and that's Jody Wilson-Raybould. She has gone from being a member of Justin Trudeau's cabinet to now she's a truly national figure. And you don't have to be on either side if there are sides here. You can think that what she did was entirely justified, or you can think that what she did was entirely reprehensible. The point is that she is now someone who matters in every sense of the term. And we've apparently the stories now is that she imposed conditions on the prime minister for ending the rift between them, and obviously that didn't work. But now the biggest story between now and the federal election this fall is going to be what she does, whether she runs again, whether she runs as an independent, whether she decides not to run. She is very quickly become one of the small handful of most important people in the entire country, and I can't imagine someone hotter than that.
Yes, she's having a great week. You got to say, like, nothing the Liberals are throwing at her is sticking. She gets turfed out of caucus and becomes a hero. There was the group of young women who want to go into politics who came to town. I guess her lineup was, around the corner, people wanting to meet her. Kind of ties into my who's cold, which is Prime Minister Trudeau after another bad week, and they just cannot seem to put the story behind them.
No, it's not going anywhere. And every time they think that they sort of have either stalled it out or gotten ahead of it, there's something else they hadn't counted on. Her recording of the conversation with Michael Warnock, that kind of thing. Now this week it's that, well, here are the conditions I imposed on. She has saved everything. And so every time they think the story might go away, there's another sort of, it keeps coming out in drips and drabs, and that's how the story stays alive.
Yeah. Have you talked to, Warnock is not supposed to be a partisan official.
No.
And I'm perplexed how he has escaped a lot of scrutiny for having these kind of conversations. You kind of interact with independent legislature staff quite a bit. Is there any, or in the press, is there any talk about, what was Warnock doing?
Well, I mean, this seems to be fairly universally agreed. He had crossed a line, and he kind of said so himself when he resigned. And that was if the Conservatives or NDP were to win the next election, I couldn't continue because I don't have their confidence, and he was right about that. And so he had whether he thinks it's fair or not, he came to be sort of seen as a federal Liberal figure, and so in that role, he simply had to go. Now, whether that happened because he was always, had been a Liberal, or whether it just sort of emerged, organically and accidentally, that may well be the case. The problem is it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, I'm going to go with my who's hot, and it is Alberta. My God, this isn't an election. This is a knock him down, drag him out, five knuckle shuffling, old time. This brawl between Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley, it could be taking place in Stu Hart's dungeon. That's how vicious this is. Multiple accusations against candidates, stuff being thrown around on social media. These two they completely loathe each other. I watched a little of the debate last night. They do not like each other.
No.
There is open disdain. This to me, I'm coming from it from outside, but this to me seems a lot more personal than, BC elections are no cakewalk, but this is taking the blood sport to a new level in Canada.
Well, you're exactly right, and I mean the thing is they're making two completely different cases. Jason Kenney wants this to be entirely about Alberta's relationship with Ottawa and the economy. And Rachel Notley does not want to talk about those things. Rachel Notley wants to talk about gay-straight alliances, bozo eruptions from some of Kenney's candidates, that kind of thing. She wants it to be a social campaign, and so they're talking past each other, and it's like they're in two separate campaigns. The only thing that they can agree on is that they hate each other.
Yes, I also had a chuckle. My 9-year-old was kind of playing on his phone as we were watching, and Stephen Mandel comes up, and he was talking about his grandkids in school, and Jack says something to the effect of, his grandkids are in school, his grandkids are probably 100, that guy's so old. Which, poor Stephen Mandel, he was a respected PC MLA at one point. I mean, come on, now he's a thing. And the other thing I enjoyed was anytime Alberta Liberal Party guys spoke, everyone else just kind of rolled their eyes and moved on. Can you imagine being a Liberal in Alberta?
That party has been just sort of ever since they nearly defeated Ralph Klein, and I'm going to get the year wrong. I want to say 1993, with another former Edmonton mayor, Lawrence Ducour. I think it was 1993, and since then, that party has not been able to define itself. They have tried running to the left of the NDP. They have tried running further to the right of the Conservatives at the time, and so they can't seem to agree what being an Alberta Liberal means, other than it means not the then Progressive Conservatives, now United Conservatives. And I mean, that is just not a compelling enough reason to rally around a party in any province.
No. Also, I should mention the big Alberta news that I know you're most excited about, which is the CFL odds makers put out their Grey Cup odds, and the BC Lions are the favorites to win the Grey Cup right now, not your beloved evil Red Empire.
Well, I mean, that's fine. It's always going to be the Stamps against the world. And that, you know what? I will say, I'll be the first to say it, the Lions look great this year.
Yeah, I'm going to, we've been talking to my 9-year-old. We're going to get tickets and go see a few games. All right. We talked about who was cold. I said Prime Minister Trudeau after another bad week. Don't at me, Liberal supporters. It's been a bad week. Who you got? You mentioned him earlier, Shane Simpson.
Yeah, we did kind of cover this earlier, but I mean, if you're an NDP minister and your line of defense in question period is so egregious that, I mean, he's basically saying the opposition, in fact, not basically, he said this, the opposition is not entitled to ask questions about a given issue, which is, I mean, it's appalling. If you get the Greens to stand up, your partners in government, to say, hold on, that was ridiculous. These guys over here are asking really good questions. I'm going to just ask the same question because I feel like we might actually get an answer. I feel like this issue could have been handled so much better by the NDP, and unfortunately, there was a few of them that were guilty of this all week. It was a very, very shouty week, but Shane Simpson, he just did not distinguish himself. At one point, I think it was Shirley Bond got up to read a quote from a social services worker, essentially saying, "Why are you doing this? Why are you discriminating against me?" And she was very careful to underline, "Look, I am simply reading this. I am not the person asking the question. I am the deliverer." And then Simpson got up and said, and I quote, if they wanted less bluster and rhetoric, they should have had somebody else ask the question. I'm sorry, it's just not a good look. And that was his off-the-cuff response, and it wasn't good. And I mean, as I say, it managed to get the ire of the Greens.
Yeah. He hasn't had a great week. I mean, the much touted anti-poverty plan came out, and really it was a nothing burger, just a bunch of rehashed announcements from other things, including removing the portmanteaus, which I'm not sure is that much of a poverty plan as much as a re-election plan, but okay. I didn't realize that everyone who drove over that was poor. I'll give you a little scuttlebutt from the Sea West Lounge on my most recent BC ferry adventure. I happened to be sitting within direct eye line, mind you, of a prominent NDP cabinet minister who I wasn't hiding. It was right there, who happened to be remarking to a supporter of his that he has heard that Shane Simpson won't actually be running for re-election. This is a one and done for Shane. So there you go, a little bit of scuttlebutt from the dark recess, my deep throat source inside the BC NDP cabinet.
Wow. Well, we will start hearing there's always a little bit of, I was going to say defections. That's not fair. There's always a little bit of attrition on all parties. But I had not heard about Shane Simpson, and we are getting to that point where we're going to start hearing from people who aren't running again for whatever reason. Yeah.
So male NDP candidates, start faking your disabilities now, get them on the record so that you can run in that riding, because of course, you have to have certain check boxes to replace a white male older MLA like Shane Simpson. All right, was that too cheeky? I can say these things.
No, quotas are I don't think that was too cheeky.
Okay, that's good. All right, well that is it for me. You got anything else going?
No, I mean, as I say, it's one
more week for session. One more week of session, right? And then there's a couple weeks off.
Yeah, because of the Easter break. So it'll be good. The break will be welcome because, I mean, I don't know if I managed to underscore this point enough. This was, I think, maybe the most heated I've seen this place. I mean, I've been in this building in one form or another since 2010. And the shoutiness, even our beloved speaker, Darryl Plecas, at times, was reduced to just saying, guys, yesterday question period was half an hour, but 9 minutes of it there was no talking. because it was just shouting and I let you guys. And then what happened? That question period was even worse. So,
Yep.
I mean, it's the level of anger. I mean, we've talked about some of the reasons why, just refusing to answer questions. But, I mean, it has been an absolutely ridiculous week here in the legislature. And I, for one, am looking forward to the weekend.
Yes. Well, Maclean, I have a theory on this, and part of this is based on hockey. You know how in a playoff series you get just angry and angry and angry and angry with each other, and every little thing the other side does just grates you?
Yep.
These guys are spending too much time together. This is why we shouldn't have fall sessions. Christy Clark was right. You got to get out of the cesspool. No fall sessions. Otherwise, you're just getting too angry, and everything that the way Rob Fleming smacks his gums bugs you, and the way that Rich Coleman rolls his eyes bugs people and whatnot. Might be a good time actually for you to bring out your repost your heckle story.
Oh man, I've been thinking about that because there are so many that you don't see in Hansard and you can't catch on TV. They're sitting in the gallery. It's just breathtaking. I won't name names now, but we are watching. And I will say that sitting in the gallery, it's abundantly clear why we're not allowed to take pictures.
Yes, yeah, I gotcha. Hey, ICBC, there's some rate changes. My suspicion is people are going to start getting bills, and we'll start hearing more and more about this.
Yeah, and if you haven't read, I know you have, Jordan, but if you haven't read the piece by Charlie Gran in the Orca this week, he was an ICBC executive, and he details some of the sort of systemic and comprehensive problems, not even necessary political ones, some of the reasons why ICBC is struggling. It is a fascinating read, and a lot of stuff that I simply didn't know. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, no, it is a great read. If you're going to have a long read this weekend, read that. It's fantastic. All right. At the Orca BC on Twitter, facebook.com/theorcabc. You can watch on YouTube, bit.ly/theorcatv. We will be back and talk to you all next week.
See you next week.